Yes, ma'am.
Right? Just say it.
People are waiting for the right mic.
To be fair, in a gathering like this, we want the left mic. Thank you for laughing. I really appreciate it. It was kind of a pity laugh. But still, it warmed my heart. It took me a minute. Yeah, everybody else is slower.
Okay, we'll go with that. If anyone registered and is expecting a book and you have not received a book, you can go this way and I will make sure you get your book.
Hey!
No? Well, maybe some of you will appreciate this. We have a microphone system in here and we have a microphone system in there, and for some reason the handheld microphone for this system is not here, that one's for that system, and guess what? They don't work with each other. But, Jim, we have your lapel on. I'm just going to get this one. I'm leaving. Go give me yours. Jim, does yours work, Jim?
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Wow.
You know what? You're important.
I said, look how receptive they are.
All right, I'm going to introduce you, and I'll use my sanctuary voice. How's that?
That's great.
Welcome, all of you, again. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Quit taking pictures. St. Paul. It's good to have you. It's finally gotten warm out. Here we are. So I hope you don't perspire too much. It is my greatest honor to introduce to has been across from the Capitol. He is the inaugural holder of the chair in Faith and Justice and the founding director of the Georgetown University Center on Faith and Justice. In 2022, Washingtonian magazine named him as one of the 50 most, 500, sorry, could be 50 though, one of the 500 most influential people shaping policy in D.C. Raised in a Midwestern evangelical family, as a teenager, he questioned the racial segregation in his church and community, which led him to the black churches and neighborhoods of inner city Detroit. How many of you knew he was raised in Detroit? There you go. Guess where he went to college? Go Green! He's the founder of Sojourners, and if you haven't read it, shame on you. But also, they put out weekly emails. You can subscribe to their stuff. He's the author of 12 books: America's Original Sin, Racism, White Privilege, and the Bridge to America. That's the first one I read of yours. God's Politics, Why the Right Gets It Wrong and the Left Doesn't Get It. The Great Awakening, The Call to Conversion, and in our book study, we just finished Christ in Crisis, Reclaiming Jesus in a Time of Fear, Hate, and Violence. And he hosts a very popular podcast, The Soul of the Nation. He served on President Obama's White House Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, and I want to thank you for that. He's taught faith and public life courses at Harvard, Georgetown. He also serves as a research fellow at Georgetown University Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. He previously taught at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and was awarded an honorary doctorate in humane letters from Georgetown University in 2007 when he gave the college commencement address. But above all, and most importantly, he served 22 seasons as a Little League coach for his 2 baseball-playing sons. Yay! And what I like to point out is that his wife was one of the first priests in the Church of England, and also a role model, thank you very much, for Vicar of Dibley. Isn't that the coolest thing? I would like to meet her. So anyways, I could say a whole lot more, but without further ado, I'm pouring you a glass of water. There's bottles of water down here in case you need more. And then you are on the road. We will take questions after Jim is done. So, help me along.
Jim Wallis.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Good. Well, I am really delighted to be here for lots of reasons. One, I got a long car ride with Bishop Bonnie, and I learned all kind of stuff about her and what's happening in Michigan, Detroit, and it's good to be here in St. Paul's. This place, Karen, this physical environment is so full of memories for me. Capitol next door. We used to march from Michigan State down Michigan Avenue to the Capitol. And one time, a car from an opponent drove right into us, marching students, bodies flying everywhere. Made Walter Cronkite news that night, lead story about this protest in Michigan. And we had lots of broken bones, but no one died. And he got off with drunk driving. But, so I've got all kinds of memories of this place. So I love to come back. Michigan State, where I did go to school, at a moment, remember Cambodia and Kent State, so you remember all those times? We shut down the university, and when they invited me back years later to do a commencement, I said to a whole different faculty and stuff, I said, It's very nice of you to invite me back. Last time I was here, we shut the place down. But nice to be back. And the highlight of that was when they brought Joy and my two boys, Luke and Jack, and put us at the Kellogg Center, you know, the hotel school. And we're in Jennison Fieldhouse, and they're in the box there watching. I'm down below, knock on the door. They open it. He says, "Hi, my name is Tom Izzo." My boys go, "I just wanted to meet the commencement speaker's family and invite you to a private practice with the team after commencement." They got geared up and geared out, and to this day, we are all Spartan fans. Go Green! All right, now we've got that settled. Speakers are supposed to say stuff like, "This is a very important place." Very important place, space, and time. That's not true now of a lot of places around the country. Our electoral system makes a lot of places unimportant. I just did 12 cities in 2 weeks. And Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and LA, you could tell they didn't feel like they were involved. Because no matter what happens, however they vote, at the presidential level, the election won't matter. It matters down ballot, everywhere. School boards, all the rest. But in Michigan, when the publisher said, "We're going to send you on a book tour. We don't normally do that, but where do you want to go?" I said, "Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio." So we had Grand Rapids, Michigan. 500 people turned up. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the same. People feel like their places, their spaces mean a great deal. So what I don't want to happen tonight is anyone to walk away saying, "Finally, a good conversation about faith and politics." Can't do that. You've got to take the conversation out of here into the streets, into our congregations, because we all have influence someplace. We are all influencers in critical spaces. All those folks in Grand Rapids, they all know people, well-connected, who need to be talked to, listened to, have a conversation with, and the same here. And here's a story. I met Chris at dinner, who's in the choir here, and we got to talk about choir, so I told her I'd tell a choir story about my point here, which is one of my team, his father is a Presbyterian minister in rural Georgia. And it's not like Detroit or Milwaukee or Atlanta, it's rural Georgia. So his wife is in choir. And they always have a practice before the service, every Sunday morning. And they did on a given day, and then the choir director says a prayer, as is often the pattern. And she wasn't a political person or a militant or right wing, left wing. She was just scared. Just scared. She said, "Oh Lord, please protect us from those cartels of immigrants coming from Mexico with their diseases and their drugs and their guns and their rapists and criminals, and protect those soldiers protecting us." And the wife of the pastor says, "Stop, stop, stop. That's not true, and we don't lie in church." Stop, stop, stop. That's not true, and we don't lie in church. She said, "I understand how you feel. We can discuss that. I'm happy to have a conversation about that. But what you said is not true. They're trying to make you afraid. And you know what? We don't lie in church." One example of how she, in that place, made a difference. If I'd have walked in off the street and told them it wouldn't have been as effective as her, with authority in that place, relational authority, telling them to wait a minute, stop and think. Let's keep our fear from deciding everything. The trajectory politically in this country is this. Fear leads to hate, leads to violence. Michigan, in fact, what often happens at your state capital, and things in Michigan often happen here first and then go to Washington. You had a governor, tried to kidnap her. You had stuff at your state capital. We had stuff at our national capital. Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech here in Michigan before he gave it in Washington. Good stuff comes and bad stuff from Michigan to the nation's capital. So I think you are in a very important place. And your spaces and places and relationships are very important. Because we're having a conversation in this country that is a test of democracy. Many of you know that. You feel that. You talk to your friends about that. It's true. But it's also a test of faith. What are faith communities going to do and not do? Say and not say. Stand up or just sit down and be quiet. It's an interrogation, these 6 months. Interrogation of democracy on the one hand. In my lifetime, which is a long lifetime, we've never had a test of democracy quite like this. In fact, I think not since the Civil War have we had a test quite like this. But now we have an interrogation of faith. What does faith mean? Or what I would say, what is the faith factor going to be in this election? There will be a faith factor. It could be decisive. And I can't control the politics. But we can, all of us, shape the faith factor in this election. We all can do it. And we have to. Because there's a third test. Test of a new generation. And I want to say they're watching. My students are watching. All the activists I deal with every week, they're watching to see what we do, what we say, whether faith stands up and says what they think it means or not. And if we don't stand up and speak up, they're going to never show up here in our churches again. So a lot's at stake: democracy, faith, and a new generation being a part of our circles. And we have to go deeper than politics. This isn't just left and right and Republican, Democrat. We won't get things solved by just getting people to watch Rachel Maddow, bless her heart. It's not going to work. And I put it like this. Every nation has its better angels and its worst demons. Better angels and worst demons. Now, I love to be in that prophetic tradition. I listened to those prophets, and they weren't afraid ever to name names. Donald Trump, I'm saying in church, is not a leader, he's a marketer, and a good marketer. He's marketing racial grievance in key states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. But it's deeper than even that, because Donald Trump is marketing our worst demons. The worst things about America, they've always been there, long before Trump. He didn't start this. It's way back to America's original sin, this doctrine of discovery, where white Europeans came and just eradicated indigenous people and took their land. And that was okay. Religiously, people bulls signed on to it. Then we kidnapped a whole race of Africans and made them chattel property for free labor. Stolen land, free labor. That's how America got great. That's how we started. That was our beginning as a nation. However, in the beginning, long before our nation, there's a text. First chapter of the first book in the Bible, Genesis 1:26. This book is not just about white Christian nationalism. It deals with it, and we will too. It's about 6 iconic biblical texts that I knew and loved, but I went back wrestling with these texts, praying over them, getting new, what did Howard Thurman say about this parable? Getting new commentaries. What do they mean now? And one of them is this first chapter in the Bible. And I love this text because imagine, I feel, maybe you do too, surrounded by noise. Political noise. Ever feel that way? You're going to feel it more in the next several months. Surrounded by political noise. In fact, part of my job is to listen to the noise and try and discern the times or what perspective might we have. And so with that noise in my head, I went back to Genesis. And I love how it starts. Then God said. All the noise. No. Then God said. Be quiet. Shut up. All the noise. Then God, here's what God said. Let us make humankind. All humankind. All of us. After our own image and likeness. That's the foundation that all our earthly talk about human rights, civil rights, voting rights comes back to that text. The divine creation of us all being equal in the image and likeness of God. So what that means, in certain precincts in Detroit, Flint, Jackson, some other places, there are plans to deny, suppress, not count, disrupt, intimidate the votes of people because of their skin color or their youth or their political opinions. Let's go deeper than just wonderful legislation like your gerrymandering commission here in Michigan. Great stuff. The real issue is that to deny somebody's vote because of the color of their skin or any reason is an assault on Imago Dei.
There you go.
An assault, an attack on the image of God. So I was on the phone with a Secretary of State from a different state. I love my talks with Jocelyn Benson. They're quite nice. You've got a great Secretary of State who cares about process and fairness here. She's doing a great job with her peers of both parties around the country. But this one was a different one. Sometimes I say to them, you're a Christian, right? I said, oh yeah. You know this text in Genesis? Yeah. Does that mean that all of the voters in Ohio, Georgia, Pennsylvania are all made in the image of God? I guess it does. I've never thought of that before. Guess it does, yeah. Then we want to make sure in your job you make every effort to make the vote accessible and open and easy and fair, not harder, easier to do that, right? Because these are people made in the image of God. Am I right? And they say, yeah. And after an hour and a half sometimes, we take each other's cell phones and talk about processes here and there. I'll be in Detroit tomorrow night. Going to be back there next week again. Steve Bland, who's our coordinator for Face United in Detroit, are having some big events in Detroit. I'm going to come back to Michigan as often as people will let me for the next 6 months. And Wisconsin, and all these places. So we were in Milwaukee, now we're going to Appleton and Green Bay. And we're going back to Hope College in Michigan. So this is the time when everything that we care about is at stake. So in the Bible, there's two kinds of time. One is chronos time, tick tock, tick tock. The other is kairos time. A lot of you know what that means. A time which changes time. A time where events can affect other events for generations to come. Decisions we make affect generations to come. This is the kairos time. Kairos moment. A time that will change time. Eddie Glaude, who wrote the foreword to this book, wonderfully said, I love this, he said, everything is coming apart. And everything is possible at the same time. We're not just preserving democracy so we can go back to the way it's been. No. Whole lot of young people who I talk to, and who I'll be talking to in Detroit next week, I'm not saying, yeah, save democracy, it's gone pretty well, and no, we have to transform it, fundamentally. But you can't transform it unless you save it. So we're going to deal with why vote. We're going to deal with it with all kinds of young people all over the country. That's a fair question. Why vote? They have to have answers to that, right? So I think you all in this place, and such a warm, familiar place to me, a lot of my years and energy, and I know it's a mixed deal. I mean, I was getting, as an anti-Vietnam organizer, I had death threats in my dorm room at night. Then we're attacked by these people in our marches. So I know you're dealing with, nice way to say it's purple, right? You've got people with different views, and that's okay if we get deeper into the problems. So let's do it. White Christian nationalism. The name spells the problem. The most inviting, inclusive, welcoming message in the world becomes white. Really? Christian. But they don't mean service and sacrifice and love, they mean control, domination. And the clergy women here could tell you about the history of dominionist theology in this country. It goes way back. This is nothing new. It's making a comeback. And everything they try and do, like gerrymandering or voter suppression or voter registration issues or polls closing too early or not staying open, everything they're trying to do can be summarized in a single sentence. There are people in this country who've been in control for a long time, who want to prevent our changing demography from changing our democracy. One sentence, that's it. They can't fully change the demographic changes because that's happening. They want to keep that from changing democracy. And so they'll be successful unless people like you and I say no to that. It was lovely to hear about the guns campaign. It's Michigan without End Gun Violence Michigan. All these groups have come together now with the support of the Episcopal Church. And I spoke to a group of all the lieutenant governors had this meeting in Washington. And I said, we got to take the fight for guns to our states. Washington right now is vetoing everything. But you're showing in Michigan that you can get some stuff done. Taking these issues to our states is a critical, wise political move and a religious move. Because these are religious matters. So, let me just run through a few of these texts, and then I want to open it to you all and tell me about Michigan, what you think is happening, and what you think you can do, and what your struggles are, your questions, your angers, your fears. I want to hear that tonight. So, oh yeah, white, Christian, nationalist. Now, and one introduction, you were great tonight, but one introduction said, he founded Sojourners in 1871.
Did I say I didn't say
You know, another introduction, no, you didn't say that. You were great. But I'm saying, I was introduced to somebody who started in 1871. So I said to the crowd, I said, well, I wasn't there for the ascension of Christ, but I have read about it. And as far as I know, Jesus told his followers, like us, go into all the world, make disciples in every nation, teaching them to observe whatever I have commanded you. And it's made into nationalist. This is bad religion. It's bad theology. And there are a lot of people, reasonably, who think the answer to bad religion is no religion. I understand that. And to be honest, there are days when I lean that direction too. When I see what people are doing in the name of religion. When somebody's selling Bibles for their own profit, and the Bible says on the outside, God bless America, God bless the USA. On the Bible, I just ordered one, by the way. I want to have one in my hands with all the documents from one nation in the Bible. Or when he has a picture of himself that he posts, and it's a defense table in a courtroom where he is every day, with a cartoon of Jesus sitting next to him at the table, and he says, I am being indicted for you. That's when I think, maybe this whole thing, right? I get that. My activist students often feel that way. But the answer to bad religion is better faith, good faith, true faith. And that's what we have a chance to help bring back. It's not just about an election, not just about democracy. It's about what we're going to do and say about our faith. And what if we act in the ways that the none of the above says? What's the most fastest growing religious affiliation in America?
nuns.
Every time people know that now. The nuns. Now I'm at Georgetown now, so I remember I said that. I said when I first arrived, I love the nuns, and his sister said, we love you too. I said, well, I love you too. In fact, when Sojourners just started, I go out to speak at these conservative evangelical Christian colleges, and there'd be 2 rows of sisters in the front row in the chapel, wearing their habits, the whole thing, what we all call our costumes. And sisters, what are you doing here? Well, we're local. I figured, why here? Well, this is a very conservative place. I said, yeah, that's kind of why I came. We thought somebody should have your back. So I had nuns for bodyguards for years. But these nuns, N-O-N-E-S, what they're looking for authenticity, courage, and inclusion. That's what they're looking for. What if we created, I have a whole thing in this book, a remnant church for the future. That had all those things. You might see a whole bunch of new people showing up, especially if we show up in the streets where they are, doing the organizing they think is important. What if people walk by our churches and said, I don't know if I believe, young people, everything that they believe in there, all the things they believe. I'm not sure where I am with all that, but that's where we talk about gun violence. That's where we have our town meetings. That's when we talk about stuff that's happening. That's when we talk about our kids and their future. Things happen to change things. I was raised in Detroit, and my dad went to the Pacific in World War II, and he came back, and all the GIs, like my dad, got FHA loans for their first house and GI Bill for their educational needs.
Except for black people.
And no black sailors on my dad's ship got that, or no black GIs got that, which is why my neighborhood of Redford Township was racially geographied to make my neighborhood, my school, and my church white. That's why I grew up in a totally white world. That's why. A decision was made to not include black GIs or sailors in what all the white GIs got. Every house in my neighborhood, 3-bedroom ranch headed by a GI like my dad. These are decisions that are made deliberately by policy to keep us apart, keep us from having proximity with each other. They do it all the time. Little league coach for all those years. I see how moms, dads too, but moms even sometimes more, bond with other moms around their kids. Hopes, dreams, fears, health, education. But as we sit here tonight, 75 to 80% of white people in America have not one person or family of color in their social circle. No bonding, no proximity. What changes us is proximity, you know? So I'm asking in Detroit now, I'm listening to my city, 15, 16, and watching the news, reading the papers, having conversations with adults, and these questions got coming up. Why it seems like life in black Detroit is so different than life in white Detroit. Why is that? I hear there are people that are poor and even hungry, not very far from us. People who have family members in jail and don't live in safe places or good housing or can't make enough money in their jobs. I don't know, it's always been that way. You're too young to ask this question. When you get older, you'll understand. Got one honest answer. You keep asking these questions, you're going to get into trouble. I tell my students, trust your questions and follow them to wherever they take you. So I took jobs in the city, and I'm making money for college, Michigan State, and my coworkers, young black men, are making money to support their families. And so you get close to people. So Butch says, come on home, meet my mom and my siblings. His father had passed. I said, sure. And so Butch and I went home. We were janitors at Detroit Edison Company. Oh. You know where that is. We would move the heavy desks around because we both felt like we're big, strong guys. And I went home, and Butch and I were talking about the police in Detroit, who were the spark for every confrontation. The so-called riots in '67, always the police. And his mother says, yeah, that's why I always tell my kids, if you're lost, can't find your way home, and see a policeman, quick, duck under a stairwell, hide behind a building. Wait till he passes, then come out and find your way home. My mom's words screamed into my head to her 5 kids. You ever lost? Can't find your way home? Look for a policeman. Policeman is your friend. That was to use episcopal language, an epiphany. Proximity brings epiphanies that change us. Epiphanies to realize something. January 6th, the riot at the Capitol, did you know it was also always a day of Epiphany? That same day. So we've had reflections every Epiphany day since outside the Capitol. These are epiphanies. When we get people closer together, they have epiphanies. But the structure here wants to keep people from having those epiphanies. So, text. This lawyer comes to Jesus and says, well, first of all, I learned it's a Washington lawyer. Because I know that tone of voice. All right, so what do I have to do to get eternal life? He says, well, I think you know, you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And to love your neighbor shows you love God. And all right, okay. Well, just who is my neighbor? Not who is my neighbor, but just who is my neighbor? Who can I avoid having an obligation to? So Jesus picks the story of a neighbor who's a Samaritan. Now let's get this straight. In the Judean culture, there were no good Samaritans. They're mixed race. They're half-breed. They're dangerous. They're false worshipers. Stay away from them. And the Samaritans were othered by the Judeans. They were the others. Here's a man, a Samaritan, and the Jewish scholars reminded me that it was certainly a Jew by the side of the road, beaten, robbed, half dead, and a Samaritan who is being othered by that culture sees someone who's other than him, and that's Jesus' best example of what it means to be a neighbor. Which means your neighbor might not live in your neighborhood. You gotta go outside your neighborhood. These texts, the Good Samaritan parable, could help point the way to multiracial democracy. Okay? Or Jesus says, you'll know the truth, and the truth will what? Make you free. Huh. So I looked at that. Truth lies. Truth lies. No, it's deeper. The opposite of truth is captivity. You'll know the truth will make you free. Otherwise, you are captive. Truth and freedom are indivisible. That's what we see all around us. A lot of people are captive. They're stuck. They're not all even bad people. It'd be easy if they're just all bad people, like him. But they're just stuck, and they're captive. They're captive to the lies. They believe lies. So Jesus is having a debate on the truth with the Roman governor Pontius Pilate on the day of his crucifixion. I think what's happening there is Pilate is losing the debate. And that's when he says, oh, what is truth? There is no truth. Strong men want to undermine the idea of the truth. They don't just lie all the time. They want to undermine us thinking there is a truth. Because there's always alternative facts, right? So the strong men want to make you just believe their truth. This is a big one for us. A lot of folks in our churches are stuck in those lies. So, and the Galatians text, speaking of proximity, 3:28, you know the text. No longer Jew or Gentile, male or female, bond or free, all are one in Christ Jesus. I learned that was a baptismal text in the early church. A baptismal rite read at every baptism in the early church. Think about that. They're saying, yeah, we're the followers of this, this brown-skinned Palestinian rabbi who taught us that these are the big pillars, the divisive, oppressive factors, race, class, gender, the big three. That's what, and we're supposed to overcome those. It's not extracurricular. It's part of our mission. Our mission is to be kind of a community that overcomes these big three: divisive, oppressive divisions. And they're saying, in effect, so if you don't want to be a part of that kind of community, don't come here. Go somewhere else. You won't be happy here. Bishop, what if we had that scripture preached at all of our baptisms, in all of our American churches? This is who we are. We're that kind of community. You don't want that? You probably should go somewhere else. Yeah. Very interesting. How do we bring these texts back into the conversation? And this is, blessed are the peace lovers. Do I have that right? Peace, or peacekeepers, that was it. Peacekeepers. No. Peacemakers. Huh. Conflict resolvers. In the most polarized time in my lifetime, blessed are the peacemakers, the conflict resolvers of Jesus, and they will be called. They will be given this special designation as the children of God. That's pretty cool. The white Christian nationalists are conflict makers. They thrive on conflict. They make conflict. They divide people. Fear, hate, violence. No, we're to be the peacemakers. And that's hard right now. Okay? I'll do one more and then we'll have a little conversation. So when I was at Michigan State and was an activist, I had been kicked out of my little church in Detroit. One night an elder took me aside and said, son, he knew what I was doing, going to the city and hanging out with black churches. He said, you got to understand, Christianity has nothing to do with racism. That's political, and our faith is personal. So the thing that's turning me upside down, tearing me apart, has got nothing to do with my faith. If that's the case, then I want nothing to do with my faith either. Yeah. So when I was at Michigan State, I was secular. Totally secular. I had no interest in churches or campus ministry or any of that stuff. I was secular. And we were at it. We were really at it in those days. War, racism, and poverty. We were at it. And we shut down Michigan State and a lot of other schools around the country. We took 100,000 people from Michigan to Washington for that big march in Washington. Carpools, the freeways, the Ohio Turnpike, Pennsylvania, full of these cars of students coming to Washington. But after all that was over, I finally sat down one day and while I was secular, I could never quite finally get shed of Jesus. Probably because I was raised with it. I could never quite get shed of Jesus. Religion, I was shed of that for sure, and I wasn't really finally satisfied with our reading, all of us activists. Ho Chi Minh, Che Guevara, Karl Marx. Interesting guys, but they just didn't have what I needed was a foundation for my social change work. That's what I wanted to do. I needed a foundation. So I went back to Jesus. And my conversion text was the 25th chapter of Matthew. So I call it the It Was Me text. I was hungry. Yeah, that was me. I had 3 jobs, but I still needed food stamps. They just cut them. That was me. I was thirsty. I was a mother in Flint, and I couldn't get clean water for my kids that didn't have asbestos to give them brain damage. The white moms in the suburbs of Flint were doing fine, but not me. That was me, says Jesus. Yeah, our land here in Guatemala was, because of climate change, we couldn't grow food anymore. Then they came, these militias, and wanted my boy to be a boy soldier. If I didn't let him go, they're going to gang rape my daughter. So we packed up everything we had, which wasn't much, and we walked 2,000 miles naked. Because in America, they're going to take us in, take care of us. But they put us in cages, and then they took our kids in different cages, and they deported our kids. Jesus said, that was me too. I was sick, couldn't afford health care. I was in prison. Mass incarceration. It's so racially defined. I teach on this. I can tell you all the data. And I always have my students on policing day tell their personal stories, family stories of policing. And it always bears out the data. The kid this year said, dark-skinned Hispanic young man. He said, have any of you ever had the experience of having, whenever a police officer pulls you over and stops you, always keeping his hand on his gun? Always, every time it's happened to me? And no white kids could ever recall that. Proximity, right? So I got this text, and they say, well, when do we see you, Lord, hungry or thirsty or naked or sick and in prison? We didn't know it was you. If we'd known it was you, we would have formed a social action committee or something. We didn't know it was you. And they said, and remember, these are all people who think they're believers. They think they belong to him. He says, as you've done to the least of these, my family, he says, you've done to me. So that text was Dorothy Day's conversion text as well. She became a mentor of mine. We were just starting out. And we talked about that text. That text, that's the economy of Jesus. It turns our politics literally upside down. The economy of Jesus turns it upside down. So I believe that we can't just block authoritarian rule. We have to. We can't just win an election. We have to. But we have to create literally a new American church. And a whole lot of young believers, young white believers, I talk to them all the time, they're ready for something different. And these meetings around the country, people are hungry for something different, for something new. And the people I know, the kids I know, they want to join with black and brown church leaders and create a new American church, a remnant church. So I think we're at a moment here, and it's a moment for us to step up and be who we are, and say who we are, and say in places where people hear that Christians are saying who they are, joining with their Jewish brothers and sisters and faith united as imams and rabbis, it's all that. But it's the Christians who have to stand up and speak up, because our faith is being manipulated and distorted for political power. Gary Wills said, any use of religion to fuel hatred is blasphemy. White Christian nationalism is idolatry. These are big words, but they're true. Blasphemy, idolatry. And heresy, what's heresy? It's things that take Christians away from Christ. Well, white Christian nationalism is taking Christians away from Christ. Therefore, white Christian nationalism is a heresy. And we should name it like that. This is theological. It's not just political or partisan. It's theological. So, what you do here is a big deal. Amen? Amen? Amen. Okay, amen. Now, at the end of this time together, I want to talk about hope, because that's a huge thing for a lot of you. I felt helpless, hopeless, I hear. So we're going to end the night with hope. But first, let's have some questions and conversations, and then the rector will guide us.
I have something that I would like to share.
Okay, I'm going to the rector here. She's in charge. And we'll do hope at the end. Hope at the end.
Say your name for us, please. Right into that.
I'm Glenn Ashley, and I'm a white man and
Gotta
a
keep
minister.
talking into that.
I am a white man and a minister, but our denomination has gotten involved in the state of Michigan by sending letters to legislators, by meeting with legislators, working with other people on banning cash bail. Because who benefits from cash bail? Just the rich people. The poor people can't get out of jail. They can't feed their families. Families get locked away from their family. They can't have a job. They can't have, it's a massive, massive problem.
Do you have a website or place you can leave us information on that and we can share it with folks?
I do have a website with that,
Okay.
but we have an organization that's called Social Justice
Okay.
in our state,
Right.
which has taken a strong position because we're writing to legislators and we are talking to legislators, and I have myself has preached about the importance of eliminating cash bail.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I took
Do you
10.
have a question for him?
No, I just have.
No, you
I
just
took it
wanted-
to one congregation, and it took 10 with me, and they said they needed more because
Okay.
there's one person
All
that had been in prison that wanted 5 of them to get to her friends.
What's your website?
I don't have a website that has that.
All right. I'll talk to you later and I'll get the
I know who you are.
I know who you are. I've seen you here before.
That's because I came here for church one Sunday.
I know you did. I remember that.
Here with me tonight.
Hang on, Joe.
Okay.
I should come.
Okay, great. We're glad you came. That's a battle worth fighting, for sure.
I have so many questions running through my mind. And I know, Joe, you have one, but I want to ask you first, because I know where you've been recently. You've been with our brothers and sisters that are on the more conservative of the spectrum, if you will. And I'm wondering, for you, what's it like to be here versus to speak to the folks in Holland?
Well, in Grand Rapids, I'm going to Holland soon. In Grand Rapids, I think most of those who came that night probably were leaning in the direction many of you might be too. But they all have relationships. They all have contacts. They all have places they can go. And at some of these things, I've done this thing through colleges.
No, it wasn't you.
That wasn't me. And students showed up across the political spectrum. And a young man said, I'm a white male. And we could have guessed that, but he wanted to tell us. I'm a veteran and I'm a Trump supporter. I said, how does this relate to me? I said, it gets you in the conversation. And you stood up here. Thank you. And you're talking, and we're talking. So what are our values? What are some values that we share? If we're people of faith, what values do we share? Where's the common ground? Where's the common space? And you can't keep, there's a text I love from Jesus. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do anything I say? Okay? So if we're going to talk about Jesus and put him in cartoons on our posts, what did he say? What did he do? Let's have a discussion. Let's have a debate. We're challenging some of them to public debates, not about who's the oldest candidate, but what did Jesus say? And what he said. So I want to go to the text, as Michael Curry keeps saying, go to the text, go to the text, go to the text. Let's have a conversation about what we say we believe. And people, young people, know what Christians say they believe. They know what Jesus said. They just don't see us doing it. So I want to go right to the heart of faith.
So I'm thinking of two words. One is scandal and one is conflict. And I feel like I've had a lifetime of dealing with scandal and conflicts as a social change activist, and it doesn't seem to be getting any easier as I get older. And I think church people are particularly not terribly attracted to the idea of scandal, and as people who love peace, we don't like conflict. So I'm just wondering if you've got any kind of encouraging, challenging word.
Well, I think there's a lot going on in people's heads, and some of them are uncomfortable with what they're hearing. They might even not know the term white Christian nationalism, but they can feel it, sense it, and they aren't sure. Some are very militant. They're going for it. I say in the book, every movement has to figure out who they can persuade and who they have to defeat. Both are important. If I didn't think they're persuadable people, I wouldn't have written this book or keep going back to Holland, Michigan, or wherever. But also there are power brokers, and I describe some of that in the book, religious political power brokers who are using religion for political power. And they have to be defeated non-violently at the ballot box. Some of the people I see, and I'm going to challenge to public debates, they have to be defeated. But the book has got tools for how to enter into conversations with people with whom you have some common ground. And you got to bring that up, and then others who are making these arguments that are idolatrous, heretical, and literally, big word here, literally antichrist. So I'm not going to give away that, or give away my evangelical faith, which Jesus defined in his opening gig at Nazareth, his Nazareth manifesto, quoting Isaiah, "The Spirit of the Lord's upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor." The word for good news there in the Greek is evangel, for which we get evangelicalism. Any gospel that isn't good news to poor people, whatever else it might bring your family together, save your marriage, get you off alcohol, all good. If it isn't good news to poor people, it isn't the gospel of Jesus Christ, period. Period. So let's have that conversation.
I have questions. All right, we know it's going to be trouble now.
Deciding where to start. So as you know, questions around Israel and Palestine have been hot on campuses for all the right and then the wrong reasons. I'm curious, I am concerned about how the war, I was going to say the issue, but how the war is going to impact the coming election. And because I work with young adults who are pretty clear about where we ought to be, how our, so far, failure, whether it's church or state, to be clear about where we are, is a challenge.
So, yeah, I'm coming back to Detroit next week for a conversation between African American clergy and Arab allies who don't know how to vote for Biden.
Right, exactly.
And what are you doing to us, is the question.
Right.
Big question, biggest in Michigan.
Yeah.
Could affect the election in Wisconsin as well. So Gaza is, there's no words. It's heart-wrenching, it's heartbreaking, it's scandalous, it's unimaginable. And I have been calling for the leveraging of U.S. aid to Israel until that's dealt with, and that's very much in process, for sure. And what I was home alone October 7th. My wife was back in England, and I watched October 7th, and the brutality was just also unbelievable. I've seen a lot of brutality in my life. And then the response in Gaza was just unimaginable. And the two sorrows on both sides are not connecting.
Right.
Two deep sorrows are not connecting. Victims are not connecting. Children dying on all sides. Truths that are true for both sides are not connecting. And the campuses, you know, as an old organizer, I'm always glad to see students out. But students who are organizing have to deal with the flaws in their own movements. We did. When we marched down Michigan Avenue, we had marshals all along both sides of our march to keep the window breakers from breaking windows. We organized trained marshals. So you've got to take responsibility for your protest. And when I was at Michigan State, some people said that we were majoring in Indochina.
Yeah.
Because we knew all about Indochina. We learned about it. State Department wouldn't even send anybody to debate students anymore because they lost all the debates. So I want to hear more of the protesters who I love and who I hang with all the time, know about the Oslo Accords. Yes. And what happened. And what part both sides played in defeating what could have been a helpful process. So we've got to look at ourselves and our flaws, and there's very different kinds of protests, different kind of encampments at different schools. It's not all the same. Yeah, there's an outside agitator thing, which is true to some extent. But what we've got to understand is Muslim leaders who are dear friends of mine call me and say, our people watch Al Jazeera every day and see babies dying, and they know the families. Most Americans aren't doing that. It's deeply personal. When I called all my rabbi friends after October 7th, they all knew people taken hostage or have been killed in a kibbutz. So this is very personal, and you don't win the argument by saying, well, yeah, but Trump will be worse. Right. That's true, but this is deeply personal. So we got to work the U.S. front. I'll just say, back to you, your depth of your question is, what does it mean for the election? I feel more than I ever had before, evil encroaching on this election. Evil encroaching. Because those of us who were advocates for a two-state solution, I remember going to Jerusalem to speak to a peace conference right after we had the great victory in South Africa. And all the Jewish and Muslim peacemakers were saying, couldn't this happen here now? You know, Mandela and de Klerk, couldn't it happen here now? And I said, not if you don't have a Mandela or a de Klerk.
And they killed the one they had.
Yeah, we have bad leadership on all sides here.
Yeah.
And that's got to be dealt with. So how do we deal with that? How do we find, and so, you know, I'm looking at talking to a lot of people, but I think we've got to understand how personal this is, and finally people have to make choices. And one thing I'll say to student activists, I'm always smile at student activists who've been doing this for, 6 months now, and it hasn't changed yet. I know that feeling. But this is long-term, and politics is always, you never get what you want in politics. You never get the solutions you're for in politics. You keep fighting for your solutions, and you see politics change incrementally, or sometimes in big ways, like the Civil Rights Act in '64, Voting Rights 65, those are huge changes. Yeah, there are things that we can change, but you know, no candidate's going to give you everything you want. But it creates space for the things that we need. So what will create more space for the solutions that we care about on guns, on so many things? What will create this space? So this will be an ongoing conversation, but listen to people's hearts, listen to their pain, listen to their anger, and then help them sort through what we're going to be facing, depending on our choices. We're going to find out there's a choice between two candidates in the fall. And I'm saying, even to the one side, we can't go back to usual. I want to confess, those of us who were fighting for, advocating a just two-state solution, people like me, we let it languish too long. We were for all the right things, spoke conferences, wrote stuff, but it wasn't happening. It was all getting worse. And we just let it fester in language. Yeah, we all said good stuff and marched around with our costumes. Yeah. But we didn't, we let this injustice go for a long time, and now the evil is encroaching on us. And if this impacts the election, that's evil encroaching on us. So how do we take that seriously? And not just do it politically, but see what's really happening here, and listen to people's hearts and minds, and have conversations like next week in Detroit. A dialogue between African-American clergy and Arab allies from Dearborn. How do we have that conversation? That's what we have to do, and be listening and not just preaching.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to bring you to a close with this question.
Okay.
You've been doing this a long time. Takes a lot of energy. 1871. Yeah, 1871.
Well, I was only 6.
Right. A lot of passion, a lot of belief, a lot of love, a lot of care. I think this leads to hope. What keeps you going?
My new chair at Georgetown is delightfully named now after a dear mentor and friend of mine. It's the Archbishop Desmond Tutu Chair of Faith and Justice at Georgetown. And Bishop Tutu taught me a lot about the difference between hope and optimism. Optimism is a feeling. It's a mood. It's a personality type. Husband and wife, cup half empty, cup half full. My marriage is the same way. Hope is not a feeling or a mood. Hope, says Desmond, is a decision you make, a choice you make, because of this thing, whatever this thing is, that you call faith. Hebrews says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for. You know that text. The evidence of things not seen. And my best paraphrase of that is hope means believing in spite of the evidence, then watching the evidence change. So a quick story to end about Desmond Tutu. So I remember being invited to South Africa by the churches to build an alliance between our churches here and theirs, and out of that came the sanctions campaign, which brought down Pretoria. But I remember I had to be snuck in the country because I was on all the security lists in South Africa. And I had to meet Desmond Tutu at his cathedral, St. George's. Beautiful, not big, but beautiful cathedral. So I got there, and the place is surrounded by military police. Automatic weapons, shields, helmets, hundreds surrounding St. George's.
What year was this?
Hmm?
What year?
Oh, this was ish. Early 80s, 10 years before the inauguration. And so a rally had been called, and the government canceled it. So Tucci says, well, we're going to have church. And they wouldn't cancel. So there he is behind this pulpit. Little man, long flowing robes, looks a bit like Yoda. And he's speaking, and I get in there just as he's speaking, and I sit with my friends over in the corner, and all of a sudden, the doors to his cathedral are broken open by the South African security police, who are just thugs. They line the walls of his cathedral, line the walls with tape recorders and notepads in their hands, as if to say, you just got out of prison, Bishop. Go ahead, be prophetic. We'll get it down. You'll go right back. My first day in South Africa, and it felt to me like they were saying, we own this country. We own this church, this cathedral. We own you. We own your God. That's how it felt to me. He stops speaking, bows his head in prayer. What's he going to say? What's he going to do? And we're all sitting there, terrified. We're surrounded on the inside and the outside of the cathedral. Surrounded. So he looks up and he flashes that signature Desmond Tutu smile. So, points at them, you're powerful. You're very powerful. But I serve a God who cannot be mocked. Then he began bouncing like a good Baptist preacher. So, since you have already lost, now listen now, since you've already lost, they're surrounding us. Since you've already lost, we invite you today to come and join the winning side. And the young people leapt out of their seats, and they danced out of the church. We just followed them. And outside, the military police didn't know what to do with dancing worshipers who weren't afraid. 10 years later, I'm at the inauguration of Nelson Mandela, and guess who's master of ceremony? Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I said, Bishop, do you remember that day in St. George's? What you said, what we did. He smiled, you remember. I said, today, they've all joined the winning side. You couldn't find one person that day who hadn't always been against apartheid. And I learned the trajectory of faith and change. It is faith that sparks the hope, that causes the action that makes for change. Faith, hope, action, and change. And sitting there with 150,000 South Africans, tears running down our faces about Nelson Mandela's announcement of a new nation, I realized that we're not so much needed as people of faith at the party, at the celebration, at the victory. We're needed back there in St. George's, when you can only see the party through the eyes of faith. And you're surrounded. And you can only see there's going to be a party at some point through the eyes of faith. That's where we're most needed. It's great to be at the party. Wonderful. But that's not where we are most needed. So I want to say to you, Michigan people, in these weeks and months ahead, you are going to feel surrounded by ugliness, by hatred, by bad polling, disappointing conventions. You're going to be surrounded by all that stuff. And what Desmond Tutu wants us to remember over these next 6 months is even being surrounded, we're on the winning side!
Couple of quick things. Next time you're in town, we're going to close down Zuby's and run it. Y'all know what Zuby's is? If you're from Lansing, you don't know Zuby's, then you haven't lived. Well, we're going to close it, rent it, and we'll just sit there at the table and have the best pizza and beer in town. So we can just, it'd be wonderful to have the conversation with you. Let you know that this has been live streamed and has been recorded. And if you want to see it again or invite other folks to see it, go to St. Paul's YouTube channel. Please, if you requested a book, I think there's some books left. If you didn't request one and you want one, there's still some books left. I think you have a couple minutes if you need to sign any more, correct? And thank you. I don't know what else to say. You are wonderful. So thank you. You give me hope.
It's wonderful to be here with all of you. And it's the hope that we're going to have. Being helpless and hopeless isn't going to help. In fact, being helpless and hopeless is kind of a privilege. Because the things that are worst that could happen will impact marginal people the most. Let's keep that in mind. So I believe in Michigan. And believe in what you all think you're out of this. And so you all are going to make a really good difference. So remember.
Thank you again.